Welcome to another installment of Math Basics, Mr. Besh. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the circle. I'm going to break this down into two parts for you. First part is we are going to identify the parts and components of the circle itself. And secondly, we're going to talk a few apps. I'm going to teach you how to calculate both the circumference as well as the area. This is the model that we're going to use to identify the circle as well as its parts and components. First thing I want to point out is the point in the center, which is Q. This is how we name or label a circle. So for all intents and purposes, this is called circle Q. You should also notice that there are points on the circle. And what happens is we connect these points to make or form line segments. The first of these line segments I want to talk about is anytime in math you take the point in the center to any point on the circle, what you end up having is the radius. By definition, the radius is the halfway distance of a circle. The example I'm using here is from point Q to point N. Notice it has a measure or value of 9.2 centimeters. Second of our vocabulary terms, anytime in math anytime we're dealing with a circle, I take a point on the circle and connect it to another point on the circle. This is referred to as a chord. And the example that I'm using here is going from point M to N. Now, piggybacking on this, there's a very important type of a chord. Anytime I go from one point on the circle to another point on the circle, and I go through the center, this special type of chord is referred to as the diameter. The diameter is the distance all the way across a circle. It is double the value of the radius. So since my radius is 9.2 centimeters, when I go from A to N, which is 2 times that, notice my diameter has a value of 18.4 centimeters. The radius and the diameter are going to be very important when we talk about the circumference and the area of a circle in doing the applications. The first of these applications we're going to be dealing with is the circumference of a circle. But before I define what the circumference of a circle is, there's something very important that I want to show you first, and that's pi. Anytime you do a geometric application with circles, you need to use pi. Pi is a Greek letter, and it has a value of 3.14 approximately. Now, to calculate the circumference of a circle, by definition, the circumference of the circle is the measure of the distance around the circle. And we use a formula that is known as C equals pi times d, where C stands for the circumference, pi obviously is the value 3.14, and d is the diameter of the circle. Now, if you take a look at my model here, my example, I've highlighted around the circle in yellow. This is what we are calculating, the distance around it. So what we need to do is we need to take the values in my formula and substitute them in. So for pi, we are going to put in 3.14, and for the diameter, we are going to put in 10. Then we calculate this. 3.14 times 10 comes out to be my value and my answer, which is 31.4 centimeters. This is how I calculate my circumference of a circle. The second application that we have is the area of a circle. Now please take a look at my model because I have a different region that's shaded. By definition, the area of a circle is the measure of the region enclosed inside the circle. And to do this, the math formula that we use is A equals pi r squared, where A stands for the area. The pi r squared part means pi times the radius squared. In simplified terms, the radius squared is the radius times the radius. So when I calculate the area of a square, I basically take pi and then multiply it by the radius and then the radius again. If you look at my model, I don't have the radius. I have the diameter, which is 10 centimeters. Remember, the radius is always half of your diameter. So now, if my diameter is 10, that means that my radius is going to be 5. And now I take these values and I plug them into the calculator the same way I see them in the formula. So now, 3.14 times 5 gives me my answer, which is 78.5 centimeters squared. It's also could be called 78.5 square centimeters. They have exactly the same value. Remember, anytime you calculate area for any type of shape in geometry, your units always becomes squared. Now this is the circles. This is how to find the area of a circle. This was how I found the circumference of the circle. And these are the parts and the components of the circle. I hope you found this lesson helpful.